Devin Sean Moss is a humanist chaplain and Webby award-winning storyteller, unwavering in his pursuit to relate stories that connect us to our humanity. A natural explorer, he uses playful inquisition to examine the complexity of the human condition and the intrinsic meaning of life. Moss maintains an interdisciplinary practice of storytelling, street philosophy, and practical altruism. I give you Devin Moss.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. And informed me earlier that this is a year since I was here last, so thank you for having me once more. I would also like to recognize, it occurred to me about 5 minutes ago that this week is also Veterans Day, and so just to extend some gratitude for our veterans, thank you for your service wherever you may be. What do you believe in? That question has been the single most significant, fruitful, confounding, grounding, and liberating question I have ever tried to answer. When I was 5, our family moved to a small town in the foothills of the Sawtooth Mountains in Idaho. It didn't take long for the Assemblies of God Church to come knocking on our door and invite us to a Sunday service, and it took even less time for me and my brother to be uniformed and enrolled in their homeschooling church program. My mom would end up teaching Sunday school at the Assemblies of God there in Haley, Idaho, and I vividly remember hearing the parable of Jonah and the whale, taught by my mother. And I remember thinking in that moment for the first time, wait, what? I won't tell you the parable, but for those that don't know it, I'll just give you the plot line here. God tells Jonah to do something. Jonah says no. God gets mad. Jonah hides in a boat, as one does. God finds Jonah in the boat, as God does. And then God sends a big storm to punish Jonah. The sailors on the boat realize that the storm is because of Jonah, so they throw him off. And this is the 5-year-old wait what moment, the whale. As soon as Jonah gets thrown into the ocean, a whale swallows Jonah, where he resides for 3 days and 3 nights as well. You have to add the 3 nights in there too. Just to contemplate and think about what he had done wrong. So on the 3rd day, the whale goes to shore and spits Jonah up. And with that was my ability to go along with the story. You see, the Assemblies of God Church had forgotten that these were parables, lessons taught through myths and allegories, and had come to think of them as facts, needing them to be true because it was more important than needing to teach a lesson. Later that year, we were promised the rapture, but that never happened. 2 years after that, me and my brother started going to public school. And in another 2 years, our family stopped going to church altogether. And by the time I was in 7th grade, I could claim to be agnostic and slip out of any public conversation having to do with God. For me, being agnostic was less about saying, I don't know, and more about saying, I don't care. I didn't believe in God, but I also didn't identify as an atheist. One, because atheists have terrible branding, but more importantly, my non-belief in God wasn't a factor in my day-to-day life, any more than my current indifference to Taylor Swift is in my life. For example, technically, I am lowercase a Swiftist, meaning I have no interest in Taylor Swift, but I don't define myself by not listening to her music, aka uppercase a Swiftiest. By saying I was an atheist was placing myself as a character in someone else's story, in someone else's system. So being God-avoidant agnostic was fine by me. But that all changed in 2015 when I got the bright idea to start a podcast exploring how death affects life. The funny thing about death, or at least having a podcast about it, is that it reveals very quickly the grasping fingerprints of human imagination. You see, I learned that we humans will stop at nothing to survive death. And the most effective way to survive death is through belief. Beliefs are an unavoidable and integral part of the human experience. They are how we navigate the dark, scary place of the unknown. They are the bridge over the void that takes us from fear to a place of meaning, a place where our existence matters. However, a belief, as everybody in this room knows, is not a fact. They ask you to commit to something without evidence, oftentimes committing to something when evidence points to the contrary. And I like proof. I actually love proof. Facts are my friend. But here's the rub, and perhaps my dirty little secret, is that I wanted to believe in something. I wanted to believe something when I was 5 years old. I wanted to believe something when I was in 7th grade. I wanted to believe something when I joined the Marine Corps. And wanting to believe in something may have been the reason why I started a podcast about death. Zen master Trudy Hirsch Abramson must have sensed this after our interview about Buddhist beliefs in the afterlife when she suggested that I become a chaplain. And I responded with, well, I can't become a chaplain because I don't believe in God. And she smiled and asked, so then, what do you believe in? What do you believe in? Knowing what you don't believe in is a great place to start, but it's a horrible place to finish. Not believing in something provides limited scaffolding for life, and devotion to a non-belief is like standing in quicksand. The more you rally against it, the more it consumes you, and the only direction is down. Not believing in something also lacks the connective power of a belief. Two or more people not believing in something is a flimsy kinship at best. It lacks the spark, acceleration, and synergy, and most importantly, the self-transcendence of a shared belief. Beliefs also require leaps of faith. They ask for our conviction. They require our devotion. They forge connection with something bigger than ourselves and become the scaffolding for our life that informs what we value, how to think, and even what to eat. For rational thinkers, they also require our acquiescence. And as a card-carrying skeptic, leaps of faith were hard enough. Leaps of logic were darn near impossible. So then, what do you believe in? But then I thought, wait a second. It's actually in plain sight. I believe in humanity. I believe that every person has the potential to be good and do good beyond themselves. Was this a fact? Absolutely not. You don't have to look far to see an abundance of evidence pointing to the contrary. But did it feel true? Yeah, it did. Could I commit to it? Yeah, I could commit. Could I devote myself to it? Yeah, I devoted. Could I use my heart while still using my rational mind? Yeah. Could the potential to be good and do good beyond oneself be the scaffolding for my values? Absolutely. And finally, as a chaplain, could humanity be my belief and humanism my religion? Well, maybe. That was tested during my clinical pastoral education at Bellevue Hospital during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Bellevue, if you're not familiar, has the historical distinction of being America's oldest continuously operated public hospital and serves as a safety net for New York City's most vulnerable populations, people who are unhoused, uninsured, mentally ill, those for whom society often overlooks. I went into Bellevue assuming that because of the pandemic, my greatest challenge would be figuring out how to sit with so much dying. But in truth, that wasn't it at all. The challenge was being with the living, those that were suffering, the despondent, the helpless, the forsaken, those moments of inhumanity. My belief in humanity wasn't just being tested at Bellevue, it was being dismantled, shift by shift. Humanism could still work as my religion, but the belief in potential of a subjective concept like good was not enough to even make it into my second month at Bellevue. So then, what do you believe in? Compassion is one of the chaplain's greatest tools, and at this point at Bellevue, I had always thought of it as the same way as the dictionary defines it. The feeling arises when you're presented by someone suffering, plus an action. However, that formula does not work because it relies on an emotion to act. Sometimes, no matter how good you are as a person or think you are, sometimes you just don't care. You cannot wait for the caring to arise before you act. An example of this, not even a month into my time at Bellevue, already a rough shift, I walk into a patient's room, and it's like I was teleported. I don't know if anybody remembers that old show, Quantum Leap, where he just gets teleported into a situation and has a second to figure out what's going on. That's what it's like sometimes when you walk into a room. And I walked into this room, and it was this elderly woman berating the nurses, the Jamaican nurses, racially berating the nurses. And then she catches my eye, because I am her compadre, I am white, she is white, and then wants me to get into her boat and says, but this is what we call them, right? And in that moment, it's hard to care. It's hard to care for that person. So then what do? I realize that belief in humanity doesn't get us through all of these moments. It takes more than that. Then I began talking with this. I was a chaplain, and I did have a responsibility, and so I did my best to calm and pacify, and we use a phrase called get into their boat. So I tried to get into her boat and connect. And then she told me the story of she actually grew up in Berlin. Her parents were a Nazi. She told the story after the Allied forces came in that she was put into a work camp. And it was so strange to hear someone's narrative that I had never even heard of or thought of. But still, I didn't care. I did my job as a chaplain, but I didn't care. And then once I actually began to reflect, because this one, there were, I wouldn't call it death by a thousand cuts, but these stories build on one another, and then you carry the weight, one on top of the other. And this one was the weight too much to bear for me. And I had to reflect because I realized that I had been in often scenarios in the room at Bellevue, sort of faking my caring, trying to, needing to care. And in that reflection, through this experience with a self-identifying Nazi, it gave me that brief freedom to admit to myself that I didn't care, or I had a hard time mustering that sympathy to then take action. Compassion was hard to come to. And in that moment of actually giving myself the freedom to admit the truth of what I was experiencing at that time, made me understand in a way that is so deep and profound that my Zen teacher always tells me is that we are all connected. We are all connected. There is no separation. And then once I let that in, it began to unfold even more, this idea. I could begin to see the trappings of what I created for my belief systems. I wanted to believe in the potential of humanity, which ultimately turns out to be no better or different than the myriad of beliefs that I had rejected. No more logical, no more virtuous. It was still a construct of projection, ego, imagination, and emotion. So then, what do you believe in? And I had what some Buddhists may call a little bit of an awakening, or at least a profound insight. And what I understood clearly in that moment of surrender was the interconnectedness of all phenomena, the non-separation. Once I actually got out of my ego, I could at least begin to see myself in someone that is a Nazi. And that's the work, the interconnectedness of all phenomena. We are not separate. And that is what propelled me, or at least carried me through my time being the chaplain for Philip Hancock when he was on death row, was the understanding that we aren't separate. The challenge of seeing yourself in someone else is the work. But what's amazing is that once you see the interconnectedness of all phenomenon, you can't unsee it. It's with you. And is it scalable? I don't know. I mean, it is a challenge to, in every situation when you feel your emotions getting activated in some way, to go to a grounding place and think about or see the interconnectedness of all phenomenon. But I tell you, it is an amazing framework in which to build your values, how to think, and how to act. The interconnectedness of all phenomena. So then, what do you believe? Thank you.